"Mommy, can we get ice cream after your meeting?" 5-year-old Lily tugged at Jessica Morgan's designer skirt as the boardroom fell silent. 20 executives froze, all eyes darting between the child, Jessica, their notoriously tough CEO, and Mark Davis, the company's newest project manager who had brought his daughter to work that day. Jessica's perfectly composed expression cracked for just a second before she turned to Mark with a question that would change everything. "Why does your daughter call me mommy?" If you've ever wondered how unexpected connections can transform lives, this story will touch your heart. Like and subscribe for more emotional true stories that remind us how deeply human we all are, regardless of our titles or circumstances. Jessica Morgan had built Horizon Innovations from the ground up. At 38, she commanded respect in every room she entered, with her sharp business acumen and even sharper wardrobe. The company's sleek downtown headquarters reflected her personality, efficient, modern, and intimidating. Employees called her the Glacier behind her back, not just for her cool demeanor but for the icy stare that could freeze anyone who delivered disappointing results. When Mark Davis joined the company 6 months ago as a project manager in the marketing department, he'd heard all the warnings. "Don't cross Jessica," they said. "She doesn't tolerate excuses or emotions." But Mark had more pressing concerns than office gossip. As a single father to 5-year-old Lily, he was just grateful for the job's stability and the generous health benefits. Mark hadn't planned on becoming a single parent. His wife Emma had died shortly after Lily's 2nd birthday, a sudden aneurysm that collapsed their world in an instant. The grief had nearly destroyed him, but Lily needed him. So each morning, he pushed himself out of bed, made breakfast, braided his daughter's hair, YouTube tutorials had become his salvation, and faced another day. Today had thrown him a curveball. His regular babysitter called in sick, and his backup was unavailable. The daycare was closed for teacher training. Mark had an important presentation scheduled, one he couldn't miss, so with no other options, he'd brought Lily to work, setting her up in his office with coloring books and promises of good behavior. "Just stay quiet during Daddy's big meeting, okay, Lilipad," he'd whispered, straightening her little cardigan. "Then we'll get ice cream." Lily had nodded solemnly, her brown eyes wide. "I promise, Daddy." The presentation had gone well. Mark had prepared thoroughly, and the marketing team seemed impressed with his campaign ideas. Even Jessica had given him a slight nod, the closest thing to approval anyone ever received from her. He'd felt a weight lift from his shoulders as the meeting concluded. Then disaster struck. He'd stepped out briefly to grab the portfolio he'd forgotten in his office, and when he returned, Lily was gone. Panic seized him until he heard her voice coming from the boardroom where executives were gathering for their weekly meeting. That's when it happened. Lily, standing beside Jessica Morgan, looking up at her with complete trust, calling her mommy. The boardroom fell silent. Mark felt his heart stop. Jessica's perfectly composed expression cracked for just a second before she turned to Mark with a question that would change everything. "Why does your daughter call me mommy?" 3 months earlier, Mark had been working late, struggling to finish a presentation. Most employees had gone home, but the light in the CEO's office still burned. Mark had brought Lily with him that evening too, another childcare emergency, and she'd fallen asleep on his office couch. He'd stepped out to use the restroom, and when he returned, Lily was gone. Frantic, he'd searched the floor until he heard soft voices coming from Jessica's office. Peering through the partially open door, he saw something he couldn't comprehend: Jessica Morgan, the feared CEO, sitting cross-legged on her office floor with Lily, looking through a picture book. "My mommy used to read to me too," Lily was saying. "But she's in heaven now." Jessica's voice had been gentle, a tone Mark had never heard from her. "My mom is in heaven too. I was a little older than you when she left. Do you miss her?" Lily had asked. "Every day," Jessica answered, her usual armor nowhere in sight. "Daddy says it's okay to be sad sometimes," Lily continued. "He says Mommy is watching over us like the stars." Jessica had smiled, actually smiled. Your daddy sounds very wise. Mark had quietly backed away, not wanting to interrupt the moment. He'd returned to his office, and 15 minutes later, Jessica had appeared at his door with Lily's hand in hers. I believe this belongs to you, she'd said, her professional mask back in place. But there had been something different in her eyes when they met his. Thank you, he'd managed. I'm sorry if she bothered you. She didn't, Jessica had replied simply before turning to leave. At the door, she'd paused. She's a remarkable child, Mr. Davis. You're doing a good job. After that night, something shifted. Jessica began stopping by Mark's office occasionally, ostensibly to check on projects but inevitably spending a few minutes chatting with Lily whenever she was there. She brought small gifts, a book about stars, a tiny stuffed owl that Lily adored, a box of special colored pencils. Mark noticed other changes too. Jessica began asking about his schedule, ensuring important meetings didn't conflict with school pickup times. When he mentioned struggling to find after-school care, she'd authorized a company pilot program for emergency childcare that benefited several employees with children. Lily had become attached to Jessica quickly. She asked about her constantly, drew pictures for her, and saved stories from school to share. Mark had gently explained that Jessica was Ms. Morgan, or Daddy's boss, but children's hearts follow their own logic. Now, standing in the boardroom with 20 executives watching, Mark faced Jessica's question, "Why does your daughter call me mommy?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. Mark saw confusion in Jessica's eyes, but something else too, vulnerability he'd never expected to see in his formidable boss. "I'm sorry," he began, feeling heat rise in his face. "I've explained to her that you're my boss, but—" "Daddy," Lily interrupted, her small voice clear in the quiet room. "You said mommies are people who love you and take care of you and make you feel safe. Ms. Jessica gives me books and asks about my day and fixed my hair when it got messy and knows I like strawberry ice cream best. That's what mommies do." Mark watched as Jessica's carefully constructed professional facade crumbled completely. Her eyes filled with tears she clearly fought to contain. "I've tried to explain that not all kind women are mommies," Mark said softly. "But she's 5, and she misses her mother. And the truth is, you've shown her more kindness than anyone since Emma died. You've made her feel special and seen. To a child who lost her mother, that means everything." Jessica knelt down to Lily's level, her designer skirt pooling around her on the boardroom floor. "Lily," she said gently, "I'm very honored that you think of me that way. But I wouldn't want to take your real mommy's place." Lily considered this seriously. "Daddy says love doesn't run out. He says my heart can grow bigger to love more people. There's still room for you." A single tear escaped down Jessica's cheek. The executives shifted uncomfortably, witnessing a side of their CEO they'd never seen. Meeting adjourned, Jessica said without looking up. "We'll reconvene tomorrow." As the room cleared, Jessica remained kneeling before Lily. Mark stood awkwardly, unsure what to do. "I never wanted children," Jessica said quietly when they were alone. "I told myself my company was my legacy. I convinced myself I didn't have time, didn't have the temperament." She looked up at Mark. "My own mother died when I was 10. My father buried himself in work. I raised myself, essentially." "I'm sorry," Mark said. "I built walls," Jessica continued. "I decided business was safer than relationships. Achievements couldn't break your heart." She smiled at Lily. "And then this little girl wandered into my office and asked me about my mother, and suddenly all those walls seemed pointless." Mark felt a lump in his throat. "Lily has that effect on people." Jessica stood, composing herself. "Mr. Davis, Mark, I apologize for putting you in an uncomfortable position. I should have maintained more professional boundaries." "No," Mark said quickly. "Please don't apologize for being kind to my daughter. Do you know how rare that is? How many people see a single father and either pity him or judge him? You saw us as people, not problems. Jessica's professional mask slipped back into place, but her eyes remained soft. Perhaps we should discuss this another time. I believe you promised someone ice cream. Lily's face lit up. Can Ms. Jessica come too? Mark looked at his boss questioningly. I couldn't possibly, Jessica began, then stopped herself. Actually, I could reschedule my next meeting. If that's all right with your father. Mark smiled. More than all right. That ice cream outing became the first of many. Over the following weeks, Jessica began spending more time with Mark and Lily, weekend trips to the zoo, movie nights, helping with school projects. The feared CEO revealed herself to be a woman with a quick laugh and gentle patience. The company noticed the change in their boss. The icy demeanor thawed. She still demanded excellence, but now she also asked about families, remembered birthdays, implemented more family-friendly policies. Mark found himself looking forward to their time together, appreciating not just Jessica's kindness to Lily but her sharp wit, her thoughtful advice, her willingness to listen when he needed to talk about Emma or the challenges of single parenthood. 6 months after the boardroom incident, Jessica invited Mark to dinner, just the two of them. Lily stayed with Mark's sister, excited to help her aunt bake cookies. I need to talk to you about something, Jessica said as they sat in a quiet corner of an elegant restaurant. Mark felt a flutter of anxiety. Is everything okay? Jessica took a deep breath. I've been offered a position on the board of a major corporation. It would mean more money, more prestige. Mark's heart sank. That's wonderful. Congratulations. I turned it down, Jessica said. What? Why? Jessica reached across the table and took his hand. Because it would mean moving across the country. Away from the company I built. Away from. She hesitated. Away from you and Lily. Mark stared at their joined hands. Jessica. I know this is complicated, she continued. I'm your boss. You're still grieving Emma. Lily is at an impressionable age. There are 1,000 reasons why this might be a terrible idea. But I've spent my whole life making safe, logical decisions. For once, I want to follow my heart. Mark felt tears prick his eyes. Emma used to tell me that life is too short for regrets. When she died, I thought I'd never find that kind of love again. I didn't want to. It felt like betraying her memory. I understand, Jessica said, starting to withdraw her hand. Mark held on. But Emma also made me promise something in her final days. She made me promise I wouldn't close my heart. That I would let Lily, and myself, be happy again. And could you? Jessica asked softly. Be happy? With me? Mark smiled through his tears. We already are. 1 year later, Mark stood in the backyard of their new home, watching as Jessica helped Lily plant flowers in their garden. His daughter's laughter floated across the yard as Jessica pretended a worm was chasing her. They had taken things slowly. Jessica had stepped down as his direct supervisor, moving him to a different department to avoid conflicts of interest. They'd had countless conversations about Emma, about grief, about blending their lives. They'd consulted a child psychologist to ensure they were supporting Lily properly. And through it all, love had grown, not replacing what was lost, but creating something new alongside it. Daddy. Mommy found a butterfly. Lily called, waving him over. Mark joined them, kneeling in the dirt beside the two people who had healed his broken heart. Jessica leaned against his shoulder, soil smudged on her cheek, a far cry from the intimidating CEO he'd first met. Happy? He asked quietly. Jessica looked at Lily, then back at him. Happier than I ever imagined possible. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, they sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge. Do you ever think about that day in the boardroom? Jessica asked. When Lily called me mommy for the first time? Mark nodded. I was terrified you'd fire me on the spot. Jessica laughed softly. I was terrified too. Not of a child calling me mommy, but of how much I wanted it to be true. She turned to face him. I spent my whole life thinking success meant corner offices and profit margins. I never understood that real success is measured in moments like these. Mark took her hand, running his thumb over the engagement ring she'd accepted 2 months earlier. Emma used to say that the universe has a way of giving us what we need, even when it's not what we thought we wanted. Wise woman, Jessica murmured. She would have liked you, Mark said. She would be grateful that Lily has you. Jessica rested her head on his shoulder. I'm the grateful one. You two taught me what really matters. Above them, the stars shone brightly, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their growing connection, and now their promise of a future together. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a new constellation of love, formed from the broken pieces of their past. Sometimes life's most profound changes begin with a simple question. For Jessica Morgan, it was, why does your daughter call me mommy? For Mark Davis, it was, could we be happy again? And for little Lily, it was the unspoken question that children ask with their hearts, will you love me? The answer to all three questions turned out to be the same, a resounding yes, that transformed 3 separate lives into one family, proving that sometimes the most unexpected connections lead to the most beautiful beginnings. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more reminders that love finds us in the most unexpected places, and that family isn't always about blood, sometimes it's about who makes room in their heart when you need it most.